So we'll talk about organizations and standards. Oh, did that. And then, but the real key here to emphasize is these future possibilities are, as I say, have not even necessarily been seen by the city council or well seen by the city council. They have not been discussed. We'll talk about how we would get these further along, and then we will have a question and answer. So, okay, so first, definitions. What is a greenhouse gas? And I don't want to read through all of these. They're really here for some kind of reference. I just want to kind of quickly go through this. I also have links in this, and I sent Kate a PDF, well, a Dropbox PDF where you can actually go to the presentation and click on those links to get more information. The green ones are the links. Just white underline is just highlighting. So you'll see that in a minute. But anyway, greenhouse gases are basically anything that makes the earth warmer, okay, because of it being in the atmosphere, and it traps long radiation, and it absorbs, it releases heat and re-emits it back to earth, trapping the heat here. What is your carbon footprint? What also would be your greenhouse gas footprint, because it's not strictly just carbon. A calculation is how many, the different amount that a country, business, anybody is responsible for. Now, you'll see that this responsible gets broader and broader depending on how far you go out. The footprint calculates both direct and indirect emission levels, and we'll see more about that in a minute. Now, the key thing is there is a difference between climate neutrality and net zero. And the simple difference is you can be carbon or climate neutral as long as you either reduce your emissions and or buy enough carbon credits from somebody who is reducing their emissions to make your emissions total net zero. But you're buying credits or buying somebody else's reduction to meet that goal. Okay, but that still is good for the planet. All right, better than nothing. Net zero, on the other hand, means that you as an individual, over the course of a year, basically, so it doesn't have to be every minute of every day, but over the course of the year, you will generate as much energy as you use during that year. And so your whole, the balance of your energy out to the grid is zero. Okay, that's the difference. All right. Now, when we go about doing this and all those things, well, greenhouse gases, how exactly do you account for them? What should you account for? How do you, so really the best way to think of this is like accounting. This is really becoming accounting for greenhouse gas. There are boards out there like there are for accounting. There are going to be standards for how you report, like balance sheets and that sort of thing. It's starting to be considered that the climate information is material when it comes to making investment choices, because people who have mitigated their climate risk are in a better position. And so consequently, so you're going to see that some of this is coming from the financial side more so than the greenhouse gas. Let's just do it because it's good for the planet. And so I just put a few organizations together. This by no means the list, but this kind of goes through the list that we're going to need to follow, okay, as a city to actually fall within standards, okay? So there's at the top of the whole thing is, and again, these green ones you can click on in the presentation. They will take you to the various sites you want further. But the United Nations is sort of the originator of this, and for what they call non-party stakeholders, which are sub-national governments, so that's where Olivet falls, okay? They have this framework convention on climate change, and so this is sort of the highest level. This is what the planet is trying to do, okay? Then you actually have what's called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is from the Greenhouse Gas Institute or something along those lines, But they taught, their whole thing is, this is what greenhouse gases are. This is how you account for them. These are the details and how and why in data collection. So in here, as an example, for an accountant, there may be several different ways to depreciate something, right? In here, there may, and you can choose any of them. They're all okay for various reasons. In here, there may be various ways to account for your greenhouse gas. And so it basically, this tells you how to do that part, okay? So that's those two. Now, following on from that, there's the International Organization of Standardization. Now, this is a very old organization. It's not strictly greenhouse gases. It regulates everything from phone lines to, it's just international standards for just about every topic you could think of. Perhaps 9,000 is a quality one, so how you create quality assurance in your operations. But 14,000 is environmental management. And the standards are voluntary. So with the standards you find in there are voluntary, consensus-based, private sector standards. Okay. But they have this one particular standard, which is ISO 14064, which is the international standard for greenhouse gas emissions inventories and verification. So this is the official protocol for accounting for and reporting your greenhouse gas. So you can think of this as like the accounting standards specifically for greenhouse gases. And not only like the greenhouse gas protocol, does it tell you which gases and how and why to measure them, this also tells you how to report them. What's going to be acceptable reporting practices, just like you get on a standard financial report. Okay. There's also organizations that talk that we kind of went from how we're going to collect data now to some organizations and standards that may help us actually address the issues. Okay. One is the International Code Council. Again, that's something that's been around forever. We've been adopting the International Code Council codes for everything, fire, building, electric. I mean, it's just a standard set of codes that are out there. But they have codes that relate to environmental. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's also this is just recent. So I made a presentation to the U.S. Green Building Committee Association, something I can't remember. And the woman presenting at the same time with me was from the New Building Institute, presenting a new code they had just come out for decarbonization. This would overlay a current code. So that could be, something the city could do. So now let's talk about the regulatory outlook. Now that I've told you these are the things, this is really what's coming down the road toward us, okay? The United Nations has, so this ISO 14 environmental management audit standards has been adopted by the United Nations and it has said in 2018 that it is the only one in measurement standard for carbon. So this process is the one to follow to measure your carbon, okay? Then along these lines, why do we think this is coming? This group of global investor groups that has 800 trillion under management or is responsible for, they all want this kind of reporting for financial control. So they'll want to see this stuff in financial reports going forward, okay? That's the idea, but this is international and that doesn't really, they can say what they want, doesn't pertain to the US specifically. Now, what's the US outlook for greenhouse gases? Well, the SEC released proposed rules for climate disclosures. This again is using those same ISO standards. And this is what they are proposing become part of financial reporting. Okay, for certainly any listed company. And so there is this coming down the line. And so you will see companies, and some companies are already doing this. I mean, many companies are already starting into these procedures, okay? Then a couple of more government entities that are discussing this. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency is concerned about climate management risk for large banks. So one of the things I've heard that might happen there is you may have to supply your climate footprint to get a loan, because the bank is going to need to report on the climate distribution of their loan portfolio. So this could also be coming. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, again, wants some kind of statement of principles for climate-related risk management for large financial institutions, and then the Federal Office of Insurance, all of this. So this, again, the whole point here is just kind of, this is all out there in the works. None of it is official yet, but it looks like it's pretty imminent. Now, that's what's going on kind of out in the world in the US. What is Olivet going to do? Well, there is this energy planning cycle, which is, I believe, a document provided by the Department of Energy. It talks about planning a city going through the process of planning for this. Now, we're biting off step 4. You may ask, why don't we bite off step 1 first? Because step 4 is a very practical step. It is basically what is controlled by that ISO standard, right? It is controlled by that ISO standard, so we can just follow the ISO standard to do this. And we are in the midst of doing that, actually, collecting some of this data. The rest of this planning cycle, we foresee doing with people, because, you know, we're identifying stakeholders, we're forming a team, we're developing energy vision. Well, I also think that developing our energy vision, it would be really handy to have the data about how we're using our energy first before making guesses at developing the vision. So again, that's why I recommended we start with step 4. Okay. The rest of this stuff will possibly, you know, we're looking at, well, let me talk about the scope. So this really should have been probably a different order. But, so you look at these various standards, there's a greenhouse gas protocol, and there's various levels of cataloging and your emissions. And you can see they're kind of related. We would technically be going down because this ISO 14046 is the standard we're going to follow. We'd be following this column, but you can see they're, as I say, they've been evolving over time and they're fairly similar. People before this were doing greenhouse gas protocols, so they're kind of close. But this is, you can see, scope 1 is basically your local usage, you know, what you truly use on site, from you know, various things. And then scope 2 just adds purchased electricity. Sorry?
Greg, I just wanted to let you know you do have a hand raised for a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Stephanie, you should be good to talk.
That's okay. Yeah, Carl, who is putting together this baseline? Who is we? Who's determining this baseline?
Let me get a little farther. I think it'll help. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what's in these things. So, and where we're specifically going within this climate neutral now is this third-party verified greenhouse gas inventory within complete scope 3. What that really just means is we're doing these two, right? Okay. And not this yet, right? But that's a much larger project because this is getting information from all your suppliers, your people that supply your staplers, that supply everything, right? So we decided to bite off a slightly smaller piece. Now, how are we doing this? Well, we actually, as I said, I went into business. This is my business partner. He is a certified auditor for this protocol. He does this all the time, works with all kinds of organizations, including cities. He is donating his time for our project. So to do us through scope 3 and audit it for us, he is donating his time to do that. How this is working is George and city staff get on the phone. We're working through it now, and we're working through, okay, where can we get this data that what is the data we need to meet this standard? Where do we get it? So our financial director talks to George because he's the one that's going to have a lot of this information. I mean, we can get our electric usage from our electric bills, right? I mean, so he's in charge of that. We also figure that accumulating this data over time, which we don't just do this once, it's a continuous, just like finance, you continuously report. That probably the best capture place for a lot of this data is at the counting when the bills come in, right? You get gas bills, electric bills. So that's where we're starting. We've had several meetings. The financial director is going to start to gather specific line item data that he thinks is what George asked for. And then the next meeting, we're going to stop and say, George, is this what you're looking for? Is it right? Do we need more of this, less of this? Where do we go from here? But this is what's happening right now. Okay. So I will go back, Stephanie, and say, did you have any questions about now who's determining what?
No, thank you. But I'm wondering, are you making this criteria apply to the new developments, like at the
We're
huge
not
development in
there yet.
Olive and
We're
170?
not there yet. Let me.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Right now, I have to say, this is the only thing that we are actively doing. Okay. Doesn't mean we don't want to do other things, but this is where we are at the moment. Okay. Part of this reason is for the rest of this, we want input from the public. Okay. I foresee that we will fold some of that community energy planning cycle steps into the part of the strategic plan development, because I consider climate to be a strategic issue, right? So part of this is to get resident feedback on some of this other stuff. Like I said, what we're doing right now is pretty well prescribed by the standards, right? So we knew we could bite this off without really needing to engage. At the same time, we also knew we were about to start the reach out for the strategic plan, which is a good time to, reach out with this too. So that, again, none of that has been planned. We just, for those of you who were at a recent meeting, we just hired our strategic plan consultant. They will have to work out, how they're going to engage exactly. And what exactly format that's going to take. So none of that's been decided, but basically the idea is out there. Okay. So, and so what I'm going to present next again is things I personally have run across. This is one of the reasons I don't know what Barb will want to do with the recording, Kate, honestly, because you will notice this was on Dropbox and not the website. And that's because I'm presenting stuff here that isn't city policy. Okay. And she's concerned, and I rightly so believe she's concerned that people get confused and think we've decided to do this already. Okay. So I will have that discussion with her. And I think she'll be okay because she didn't object to the presentation being posted, just not on the city's site directly. So, anyway, so that's kind of what's going on. And so I'm guessing we might get the recording on Dropbox. That's all. So, so let me go on. So again, that was what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I guess I'll pause 1 second here and see if there's any questions about that still. Nope.
So just to clarify, Greg, the things that you listed there are only as pertains to city buildings, city functions, city specific, city government specific.
what I call city as a business
Okay.
versus city as a code jurisdiction, which is what we're getting to. Okay,
So all these developments that aren't city developments, like we obviously have the community center, they don't count right now, only the community center, which is the only thing they're building that I know of.
what are you
belongs to-
talking about when you say, I'm sorry, when you say count, do you mean count in our greenhouse gas emissions?
Yeah, that you're gonna try to develop
Yes,
these
yeah.
standards with,
Right, so the initial is just, again, what the city uses directly, so that would be the community center, the city center, the gas we put in the police and the fire trucks, now, that would all be part of this, so our direct energy consumption. What wouldn't be in here is all the energy used to build the fire truck. Okay. Now, in scope 3, we have to put that in there. Okay, so all the whatever happened in the manufacturing line for the police cars, but that will be a scope 3. Okay,
okay, that makes more sense. And if possible, before we end, and it would be interesting to know if the new community center already has several green things going on,
not as much as I would want,
Okay,
but again, we were scrambling. And it was tough I hadn't introduced this enough. You can't just walk in and say, do this, So I kind of felt like we need to have some of this other stuff in place before I can make the case logically. I mean, they took normal greenhouse gas stuff in mind. I mean, it wasn't sloppily built, but as you will see, there are various levels you can go to. And did we take it to a level that I would like to have seen us try to take it to? No. Do I know we could have afforded to do that? No. I know we could afford to do what we planned, we planned and figured out how much it would cost. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do something after the fact. Doesn't mean we couldn't put, again, not committing to this, but we couldn't put solar panels on top of the city center, put solar panels on top of the community center. Doesn't mean that can't happen. And in fact, we may be able to get grants, and or if we can reduce our carbon enough, sell carbon credits to pay for this. Okay, don't know, not guaranteeing anything, but just saying all this possibility sits out there. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, I'm sorry, Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah, so just so it sounds like what we're talking about is the city government's emissions, not say the city as a whole. So
Well,
like
we're
if
getting to
private
that.
residents build a whole bunch of McMansions and started driving Hummers everywhere.
You
that
guys
would-
are great. You just lead me into everything.
Okay,
You guys are great. Give me a second.
okay, sorry.
So these are some steps. So look at point 2. Some steps of the energy planning cycle may be incorporated in a strategic plan update process. And the next thing I'm going to tell you is some of the things Olivet could possibly do based on my own research that these exist. Not that they're necessarily a great fit for the city yet, okay? But I wanted to show you, I think you really guys wanted to see how can we address the kinds of issues you're talking about, like the houses being built and those kinds of things, okay? So let me go on. So first of all, there's the Energy Conservation Code, and Olivet, which again comes from the International Code Council. This is part of something we do standardly, but we're enforcing 2015. It's not unusual. The codes don't get adopted the minute they get released. Also, I'm not sure which department would be the inspectors on this, because we get inspections for electrical from the county. Okay, and so I don't know, you kind of have, their inspectors have to kind of be up on what the current code is. So we also kind of tend to follow the county, right? But that doesn't mean we couldn't. And there is a 21 code. Now, this, as far as I'm concerned, is like the minimum step we could take. Just updating the code. And then everything built in Olivet would have to follow this code and not the 2015, which this one is obviously more stringent. Okay, now, the next kind of what I consider up the ladder would be to do something like this, which is to overlay our code with this. And I don't want to get into all of how zoning works and what overlays are. Let's just say that we would just adopt this as our standard. And this would say cover all electric and mixed fuel operations, but it basically, the idea is, you know, it's got even a higher standard to which you build things. And it's better. I mean, again, I'm not going to get into all the details of it right now. And again, these are links you can click through and see what they are. Okay. Now, another one that I consider exciting, I don't know whether it'll work, is what's called an urban eco block. Okay. And an urban eco block is an infill development, okay, that looks at social, environmental, and economic systems to minimize human impact on the climate, and isolate in their ownership of the blocks. Suggest to each other age, class. We want a mix of age, class, use, race, ethnicity. Many areas, again, this was really developed for the city of St. Louis. Again, at one of my making a presentation at one of the US Green Building Council meetings, I ran into a guy they're doing this. This is a not-profit thing. And so we started to talk about, would this make any sense in Olivet? Could we make it make sense in Olivet? And we're going to continue to speak about it. But again, it's he and I, right? Before I even bring it to the city, right? Because I need to understand it so that I can go back and explain it just like I'm explaining this, right? But I think this is very exciting because it includes 20% low-income housing, right? To ensure economic and social diversity. You know, if we could build a block like this in Olivet somewhere, you know, not that we have all that much open land, but, you know, so this is kind of what the thing would look like, right? So you've got a block of houses, you know, surrounded by more or less kind of a park playground area. All this would have their own energy generation. They might have shared battery storage here rather than individual battery storage at each house. So it is just a whole idea of both economic and social and energy ideas put together. And if we could find something for this, again, I don't want to read these, you can read them. But the one other thing I wanted to bring up about the urban eco block is part of our problem in Olivet is obviously our land is expensive. If we want to do something like this and it's not doable at the market rate, is there anything else we could do? Okay. And this also provides a kind of a funding idea for this, which is a community land trust. Won't say I know a lot about them, right? But here's kind of the idea. And it's kind of a not-for-profit fund that basically would buy up land in Olivet and hold it to then use for something like this. The residents, this would not be something that like the residents rent. This would be something the residents take an ownership position in, okay? But if we could, you know, get some donations in some way, we could potentially use this as a partial funding mechanism. So I just wanted to throw that out there, okay? So this really kind of envisions the whole process, including how you're going to fund it, possibly, right? So those were kind of things Olivet can do as a code jurisdiction, all right? The fact that we're a city, the fact that if we passed either one of these, it would apply to all the new buildings, everything in the city, right? So that takes care of us as a code thing. And then this eco block just seems to tick all the boxes. Again, I don't know that we'll be able to do one. Now, changing from Olivet as a code jurisdiction to Olivet as an advocate. Okay. We want to interest, there are programs that don't involve the government, that don't involve code. I'm using one of them for my house. Why people don't do this in Olivet, I do not know. Okay. So, but this is one of the things we want to concentrate on specifically, and I will talk about a little bit more what that is. We also provide education to residents and the public, which is what we're doing right now. And we promote best practices for other jurisdictions, because although someone, I think, asked me about, can we form an environmental committee like, I don't know, Webster Groves or somebody, I don't think anyone in the city's doing it at this level. I mean, in the metro area. If they are, I'd like to be working with them, but I haven't really gone out anywhere else because I want to get our ducks lined up first. I want to see that it's going okay for us before I go out and start talking to other people about this is how to do it. Okay. But, it doesn't mean we can't have some of those things, but I also want you to be aware that I think it's really way more in-depth than people think at times. Okay. So this is the standard my house is being built to, which is Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready Home. This is not a code thing. This is just, the idea from the Department of Energy with this was to brand homes this way and use it as a marketing for builders, because it is a cost-efficient package of many energy efficiencies, higher than any of the code standards I was talking about. Okay. And it gets an independent inspection from a third party, so that you're not taking the builder's claim, that it meets the DOE standard, and the builder can put that brand then on his house, right? There's a whole branding program for it. Why we don't do this why people don't do this in Olivet, I don't, probably because they don't know about it, my guess. But I think some people at least would opt for this, given, to be honest, the price ranges of some of the houses in Olivet, this would not be a big deal. So at least some of the houses in Olivet. But our builders don't, and so I want to get the builders together and ask them why they don't offer it. And as I said to Kate, I would like to get this group together and ask, did you not know about it? Why, I am not a typical house buyer, so how I got here is not going to help, right? I need more typical home buyers to tell me what they look for when they go out for a house. Because this was my first requirement of my house, not absolutely first. And then you could see, I know we're getting a little long, so I'm going to try to go quicker. You can see that it's got various advanced enclosures, hugely thermal. I have, again, taking mine to a terrible extreme. You don't have to do this. Mine will have earth tubes, which bring in the air through the ground to pre-temper it before it hits my HVAC, my geothermal HVAC system. Okay. And I think I saw Meg was on here at one point. I think she showed me her geothermal system about 10 years ago. So anyway, I will have a geothermal well system, which then goes into a heat pump. And then everything in the house is Energy Star compliant, refrigerators, dishwashers. There is no gas in this house because that requires air to be released to the outside. So you don't want that. So it's an all electric house, but it's got these ventilation, something recovery ventilators, where the air coming in from my earth tubes will get passed from the air going out, being exhausted out, and they will exchange temperature and humidity so that you're not wasting that outgoing heat, okay, or that outgoing humidity. So anyway, that's kind of and those are not necessarily in this standard, but I'm taking my house there. Okay. So that's, again, my knowledge of this comes from the fact that I'm doing a lot of it. Okay. Other opportunities, I am going to give a presentation at Old Bonham Elementary to the 4th grade gifted class. Okay, so I consider Kate knew about this, but here's a list of questions they sent me. I'm going to show them a little bit about home automation and some of this technology, attempt to answer some of these questions. So this, again, this is Olivet as an advocate.
Greg, my son's in that class.
Oh, cool. Is he in the Power over Ethernet one? I know they're in multiple, they've got multiple groups and I'm only dealing with one.
Yeah, I think, didn't they go to your house?
They're gonna go to my house, yes. Or they did. Maybe they did already. I don't know, because I won't be there. I'm living in South County right now in my friend's unfinished basement while my house is being worked on, which is why you don't see my background. But yes, they were supposed to take a field trip. It turns out that the teacher, Tammy, is the wife of my site manager on the construction project.
Oh, wow.
So it works out just great. So yes, they're going to do a field trip. Okay, so what else can we do? Possible future opportunities, other jurisdictions. We want to, again, I don't think anybody is really in the city that in the whole metropolitan area is looking at it at the level we're looking at it at. Maybe they are. I'd like to let them know where we are and find out where they are, right? I think we're going to be ahead. So I'd like to advise on best practices and consider some kind of partnering wherever it makes sense to achieve better results, right? I can't tell you what that is at this point. That's why I feel like we need to get that baseline done, among other things, because that'll kind of tell us what we ought to concentrate on. Okay. So one other outreach I did, which was I went and presented what, well, I presented my house, but Carlos went and presented to one of these US Green Building Councils what Olivet is doing. So he basically gave them what I just gave you at the beginning, okay, and how we're managing this. So we, again, this is kind of happening, right? And so with that, I will leave it for any questions I did not address or anything else. And I guess I can probably quit sharing so that we can all see each other better. Okay. All right. Any questions?
I have a question, but I'm like going and I can't never get to net zero. But I'm definitely making a bunch of changes to my house now that I've retired and have time studying it. It's very complicated, but I just want to suggest to everybody one thing to get involved in or look at the videos or at least get the information is a group called Rewire America. They have a free online thing. I can get it out to Kate probably what the whatever the email or the address where you can see just how to get gas out of your home, how, step by step, all these different things you can do. And then they have all the information on where the IRA, what's going on with that and how much, you can go in and do a calculator based on your income and where you live to get an idea of how much money you could take off for if you do get a heat pump or whatever, so, and then I just had my energy audit and found a guy that was pretty reasonable that came over and was really good and interesting to watch him. And now I've got my handyman going to come and do some mitigation before I start working on getting an air heat pump. But I'd be happy to share the guy because it was $375 and a lot of people are like $500 to $700 to come out for a consult. And he was here 3 hours, plus he sent me a report and didn't mind if I followed him around and asked a bazillion questions. So if you guys want it, I'd be happy to give that too. So
let me just say that, and again, I haven't finished using them all because if any of you have seen the condition of my house, it is a hole in the ground with some foundation and a few steel posts sticking up. And it's been that way since May because I can't get my steel for my joists delivered until December 15th. So it's just kind of been sitting there. But as I get more experience with some of the contractors, and I have some experience now, I can quite happy to talk about their, my experience with them, with anyone who would be interested. So, and the other thing I am trying to do is, if you will notice that my team is connected to Old Bonham Elementary. My T.E. Williams, my construction manager, is an Olivet person who's never done anything like this before. I basically tried to build my house in 2018 and couldn't find enough with this construction manager, and could not find enough contractors interested because my house was too unique. I've got steel framing. I've got, a lot of things that you wouldn't have in a typical house. So it got postponed, and it got restarted this year. But I'm kind of glad, because there's a lot of stuff that's out there now that wasn't there 4 years ago. I'm having a Tesla roof on my house, which is where the shingles are the solar panels. There's not a separate roof and shingles and solar panels. It is the roof. So it should have a better look, I hope. That didn't exist 4 years ago. So there's a lot of stuff I'm just adding to do it now. And again, I realize that a lot of people are not in my position. I don't ever expect anyone to take their house to the level I've taken mine. I'm doing this as an experiment, and because I have a huge interest in this whole topic. Okay.
So Carl, I'm sorry, Greg. So pertaining to the city,
Mhm.
how are you, so you're doing a baseline energy now,
Mhm.
and then how do you propose to get the city to change things, or to make improvements in their buildings? Because right now it sounds like you're just a one-man show. So how are you going to get these, how are you going to improve the government buildings so they're more energy efficient?
Well, I can't make any commitment because I can't control anything as a council member. I can try to get the whole council to go along with something, but I personally do not have any control. So
I know. But is there a plan? How do you,
well, again, what I foresee is we will take the data from our baseline, which will tell us where we are, in fact, expending energy, right? And we will put that into the planning process of the strategic plan, okay? And the strategic plan is what drives the city council decisions. I mean, I think you've heard that enough, right? It is, and we're doing a new one. And I think someone said, we don't, at least some people don't have the current residents in mind. Well, one of the things we found out from the census just recently is that 25% or so of the people in the city were not here for the strategic plan. And we didn't realize it was that high. If you ever come to an Olivet meeting, you mostly hear I've lived here for 40 years, right? So we realize there's new people out there. This is what we're trying to do, is engage them.
right? And that was one of my questions, because all these committees, the planning and the PCDC in particular, who sets all these ordinances for building codes, there's people that have been on that committee for 20 years. And so I guess my question is, it seems like these committees should have term limits. You can't be on a committee for a term limit of 2 or 3 years.
Well, first of all, most of the terms are 4 years at least. But secondly, it's not that every seat is open to every resident. There are certain requirements for certain seats on PCDC. You have to be in the field. You have to be an architect or an engineer, or not every position is like that, but 4 out of the, I forget, we got 7, 4 out of the 7 are like that. You have to be in the building business of some kind, because we want that expertise there. You'll notice, I believe that Rob is he's in a environmental.
Industrial hygienist.
Yeah, right. And so plus the people that come, we put out the advertisement to the public. We can only interview the people that come before us, right, that apply. So we have to look at both Do they meet the basic qualification for the position that's open? Are they an architect or whatever, if that's the requirement? And we also then try to look at everybody that applied and pick the one that we think has the best expertise for the committee. I mean, that's how we do it. Again, some of the other, PCDC also is a little unique because it has statutory requirements for, it's not just a committee that Olivet made up. Unlike most of the other committees, we don't have to have them. The PCDC is in state statute, and a lot of its functioning is in state statute. Okay. And so we've got to contend with that too.
We do have another hand up too.
I'm sorry, yes, who?
It's for Dan. I don't know, Stephanie, if you had any follow-up questions
That's
on
fine.
that, but I just don't want to get too kind
Right,
of far
that's
off.
fine. Right, you're right.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So, I teach philosophy and right now doing a class on sustainability and quality of life at SLU. And right now, actually, we're doing like suburban retrofitting and urban planning kind of issues because that's an area where these things come together. By the way, yesterday, Chesterfield or somebody in Chesterfield announced like a $3 billion potential project to replace Chesterfield Mall with apparently a mixed-use walkable community.
Sure.
And that's actually, that sort of retrofitting malls is great. Well, we don't have any malls here. What I am wondering is, and I guess it's partly, this is a two-part question. On the one hand, is all of it thinking about with a 20-year plan coming up, things will be pretty different in 20 years. And so we really need to be resilient and able to help each other out when we get horrible weather or whatnot. And also, there's going to be a big influx of migration from the South. And there's probably going to be more demand for public transit, hopefully. And then on the other part of it is there any thought being given to, like, it sounds like maybe Olive Crossing is a promising step towards that sort of vision of like making Olivet, because right now, I mean, I really like living in Olivet and I feel like we have a lot of potential, but we've got this terrible strode, like a road that doesn't know whether it's a street or a road. It's where people live, or is it where just traffic goes through like a highway? So it's hard to really get inspired. But then you look at like Kirkwood, which is a different town, but somehow they managed to take Lindbergh and or a stretch of it, and the downtown there is pretty livable. It's pretty pleasant. Is there thought being given to ways to maybe redevelop some maybe underperforming business areas? I mean, there's a lot going on now, but where, for instance, like my interest after the kids leave the house and staying in Olivet would really increase if I had places to walk to that'd be appealing other than Sugar Fire and Fallon's. So anyway, that's basically it.
I think that's a great thing to bring up. Let me just say that, so prior to about 10 years ago, there was absolutely no development along Olive Boulevard for years and years and years. And that was because the city council around then didn't want any development. It was all, let's just stay here by ourselves and whatever. About that time, different people got elected. We said, we need to start to ensure the future of this city, right? Because we just think it was deteriorating, right? As you say, many of the places I think you're talking about that don't look great, there are even more of them, right? So we have concentrated on economic development for the last 10 years, and you're finally seeing it all come to fruition. You're seeing the Gateway, you're seeing the Oliver, you're seeing Plant Haven, you're seeing Easy Storage, which is just starting there next to Dobbs. You've got another apartment complex going into Hilltop. All of this in the last 10 years, right? And most of it just being built right now, right? One of the nice things to know about the Oliver is they leased up 60% of their space in their first weekend. They had no expectation of coming even close to that. So we are a popular place to live. And we are trying to do, I think, exactly what you're saying. We asked the Oliver to put some stuff and build that building next to them, which was where Timekeepers was. That's supposed to be a restaurant. All of Plant Haven is retail, right? That whole building, but they're seasonal, that's the seasonal garden center, if you didn't know. But they're already opening their seasonal garden center, but then you're gonna have a bunch of whatever else they get in there. We made the same deal with Easy Storage. We said, okay, you got to build your building a story higher and put retail in the front than what you wanted to do, right? And so we've got 6,000 square feet of retail, new retail coming in there. Plus you've got the Gateway. They believe, and I do not take this because this is just hearsay and rumor, but they believe that after the apartments, they will do the front, okay, which will be all the retail stuff, right? Restaurant, outdoor seating area, all kinds of stuff there. So I think we've been driving toward what you're asking for. I don't know that it's obvious. That's the issue, right? So I don't know. Is there anything else you would ask about that? But that, and I would love to hear more about your sustainable, you know, again, your existing housing retrofitting stuff. I mean, if nothing else, I'd like to have us, the city say, here, the publish, right? Educate, not just demand, but educate if you really want to do it. So if we can get some good stuff out there, Stephanie or whoever, yeah, it was Stephanie that was doing hers, and you know, you know, we can just advocate, right? You guys can advocate. You can put on your website too. We can cross-link, right? Whoa. So that's, you know, part of what I consider to be the advocacy. And then, you know, we could also, if so desired, again, you also alienate the people that don't want to do it. So again, this is why I want to get feedback from everybody during the strategic planning process, because people might not appreciate, some people may not appreciate us if we were to pass something that says if you retrofit your house with something, you've got to take it to a certain level. I mean, that is possible to do. That is true, for instance, like with egresses and things. If you weren't required to have an egress someplace when your house was built or whatever, we don't, when we pass a new law that says you got to have one, we don't come back and make you put a new one, put it in, right? But if you do any rework on that house, we make you put it in. So could be something like that, and people may not appreciate that expense. I've heard that, believe it or not. So, but I would be glad to at least, I mean, at least we can do is promote it, right? If we can take it farther than that, fine. But, so at least we make people aware.
So Greg, what are some of the ways that either this group as an advocacy group or individuals as citizens can help motivate the city or encourage the city to move in a direction where, like, I guess I'm asking, like, what can we do as people and as an advocacy group? What are the ways that we can get involved in order to potentially affect change?
Right. So I would first say participate in the strategic planning process, in that not only for this, but for everything, because again, our whole goal here is to get your inputs into this. Everything that's got to do with the city and direction. As I say, I came onto the city, first PCDC and then council, just after the strategic plan was done the last time, and I had nothing to do with it. I had no contact with the city during that period, but it was about a year later. So I have been following this plan, right, that I didn't participate in, but you know, I was told it was what the citizens had put together. So that really is a driving document. And I would also say, you know, let's just talk about suggestions. What can we do? Part of our problem right now, honestly, is bandwidth, right? The city is very busy. You know, Carlos is down 2 people in the building department. He would have to initiate any kind of zoning change that and run it through PCDC. I mean, that is required by state law again. Before it came to us. And of course, we'd have to have a period in front of that where we figured out exactly what are the rules we're going to put in place, right? So you can participate in that process. And then that will come as a recommendation to the council. The same is true with the strategic plan, although the strategic plan is officially a product of the PCDC, the council, but we approve it. Okay, so they'll forward that as a recommendation, we'll approve it. So I'm a little hesitant to say we can do this, this, and this, because I'm not sure what this, and this should be. That's again, what I'm kind of looking for the energy baseline to kind of help us say, what should we promote? If we're not expending gases this way, or in the built environment, that's what would take an analysis. There are ways to estimate the current carbon footprint of the city, right? Including the whole built environment. We can do that, but that would be a scope 3, right? That would be technically a scope 3. So it's not like it isn't necessarily in the plan, or shouldn't say in the plan, because that hasn't been committed to. The scope 2 has been committed to, but I fully expect we will continue on from scope 2. Question is, do we try to do a scope 3 in measuring the gases, or do we move into, what you can do is move down to one of the next levels, like do something, right, with your knowledge, right? So we don't have to do the scope 3 to start mitigating things in scope 2 if we see what they are. So it would be that to promote. So, it's in the long run, I don't think anybody in the city doesn't want to do this. It's bandwidth, it's time, it's money, it's those kinds of things. And all the other competing interests, right? The parks, takes time. All the new building coming up is one of the reasons Carlos is so busy, right? And doesn't have that much time to work on new amendments to the zoning laws or code. So, that's part of it. The other thing would be to look for other funding sources. In other words, we obviously look for all the grants we can get for something. I'm hopeful we can create some projects that would actually generate carbon credits where we would be selling them and we'd get some income from that to fund our other activities. I can't guarantee that though. I mean, again, it's something we can look at. There's just unfortunately, I've got a lot of things possibilities. I feel like we need a little more information before we can really point in a specific direction of what to do beyond gather the baseline. And if anybody has anything they think we can, but again, it's like if everyone agreed we were going to do the scope 3 carbon, we got no way to work on it right at the moment. So, and this is why I'm filling in. This is not typical council for me to come out and do this kind of education, right? This is me trying to fill in for staff to help a little bit, honestly. And but I'm glad to do it because I find this is a hugely interesting issue, as you can tell, and I like to talk to people about it. So
Are there any other questions from folks?
I have one other thought there, and when we talk about the money part, I don't know everything that's involved in that IRA bill that was passed, but it sounds like communities are going to get money to do a lot of infrastructure projects that are climate related. So but I think a lot of it's going to be known better next year, since I guess it has to go through, get dispersed to the states, and then the states have to disperse it.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. It was a trickle down when the COVID money came through. It was a while before we actually got our amount, but yes, those would be funding sources. We will mine any grants that are available. I'm quite happy with that because it re-upped my credits that I'm due for solar and a number of other things that were going to expire. And we're already lower and we're going to expire. They put them all back to 30 for the next 10 years. So I'm quite happy, given the state of my house, that happened, because I was counting on those credits to help pay for it. So anyway, but yes, I think that's, you know, various different things we can do. And it's just, as I say, there's so many possibilities. We just need to figure out which, we need to figure out our path through the possibilities, right? And not that we shouldn't get to all of them, but we can't just do them all at once either. So yes, Dan.
Just one thing that really struck me in your presentation was when you were talking about your house, like if you just talk about it without talking about the environment, there's a school of thought, pragmatic environmentalism is if you want to save nature, talk about it in any terms other than nature or the environment or anything. I'm a tree hugger, so that all resonates with me. You start talking about cool stuff. Like the gearhead in me is geeking out over just all the cool stuff you're doing in your house. And I'm like, wow, I just want all that, stuff. And it just reminded me of a time where I got a lot of hope when I was down in DeSoto with a very conservative crowd. And the guys were all who I don't think any of them had the environment on their minds at all, but they're all geeking out over how much money and stuff they were saving with switching to LED bulbs and like hybrid cars or whatever. It was that it's cool technology and it enables you to be more self-sufficient, save money, resilient. And it's not that we shouldn't talk about the environment, and I don't know the right answer to that anyway, but I just wanted to, that struck me as really a place to reach people with that kind of construction.
Agreed. And I would like to sell most of this is in the long run, it is efficient. So that DOE program I spoke of, I mean, they have evidence that in the long run, costs less to have that kind of a house. So yes, to make all this, I would, I'm a generally fiscally conservative, socially liberal person. So I always look, how do you fund things? In other words, that's why I promoted economic development right out of the gate. Because to me, once you have money, you can do all the other things you want, right? So you've got to keep an eye on the dollars, right? And so, I hope we will see the fruition of these because as these other things come online and our income increases, maybe that will in fact provide us for more money. And the other way we've done things is obviously and we have the residents to thank for both of these, is putting out bond issues for the city hall and the parks, right? And it would be possible if people were willing to pay. Again, this is why we need citizen input. I would never pass a tax like this without feeling I had a great majority of the city behind it. But we could do things that way. And, as I say, we really need a lot of citizen input. Otherwise, you're going to say we did it in a vacuum, right? And I don't want that. I want the citizen input. So that's why I said we picked the one piece that is prescribed and kind of trying to figure out how to wrap all the rest of this in. As far as my house, again, just quickly, my house actually has 5 design goal principles. 1 was energy efficiency. 2 is life and economic safety. 3 is universal design. So it's completely ADA accessible throughout, pre-prep for grab bars. It's got a place for put in an elevator because it's a 2-story house. What I also call living flexibility, because I'm not married, probably not going to get married, probably not going to suddenly get some kids. And so I wanted a house that was kind of fit into Olivet to begin with, but at the same time, I feel like people my age are going to start to live together as they age, right? And so I've built this house that I can take the master suite, reflect it across the middle of the house to the front of the house. It replaces the 2 regular bedrooms, and suddenly, without any plumbing changes, suddenly I have 2 master suites for 2 adults. Okay, I'm putting another master suite in the basement, right? It's a whole living apartment with a kitchen, right? In fact, that's my room. I get the basement. So, it's got that. And finally, the thing I know most about are computers, right? So this house is going to have home automation that you won't believe. All right. I mean, it will know what room you're in within a foot. It will know, it'll route your phone calls in there to whatever the local speaking device. And this is all of my dreams, right? So if you're a geek in that area, I'm there too. So anyway, that's the whole background on my house. So
And as far as the house goes too, I will send out a link to that, the presentation that's happening with the Old Bonham Idea Lab. It's not necessarily open to the public, but Tammy McLean did say that members of our group who were interested, and I know we've got some parents in the group anyway, would be welcome to attend.
yes. And that's going to be a little bit more on the home automation.
Yeah,
side.
that'll be more specifically on the home. Jean, did you have a question? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Yes, Greg, I was wondering, thank you again for your presentation. But when you talk about participating in the process, what is the best way that we can do that? Should we attend meetings or offer ideas through written communication? What is the best way?
All of it. And
All of it.
yeah, and most specifically, I would say, again, I sent Kate a link with a QR code that should get you, I don't know anything because I didn't even do with setting it up. I just saw it, so I forwarded it. But should get you set up to be on the list for contact for the strategic plan initiative. Okay, so we're doing the strategic plan, much like we did the parks plan. We put together a citizen committee, and when we do that, we ensure that it represents all parts of the city. We get this, people from all quadrants of the city. So we do a very, unlike commissions sometimes where we're only can do the people that will come before us and ask to do it. We can't just say, you're going to do it. Here we get volunteers that then help recruit people from all those various areas of the city. And encourage them to come to the meetings. And we keep track, so if you didn't participate in, if you're too new to have participated in the parks process, people then put a sticker on what quadrant of the city they're from. So we know, did we get this input, right? So we do a pretty good, I think, a fairly good job of trying to solicit input. We did this for the parks plan. I expect it was the same consulting company too. So I expect we'll do very much the same thing. And that would be a good way to, and as I say, we just kind of reach out to people we know in this situation because we know they're interested and they would be involved. But their job is to recruit as many people as they can from their areas, right? And so I hope we get a good participation on the strategic plan, and you would be able to, make those kind of suggestions during that time.
Okay, thank you.
And I will, I'll send out a follow-up email that will have the presentation slides. So if there was a specific element that you maybe wanted to learn more on, you would be able to have access to click those links. I'll also include that Idea Lab at Old Bonham where Greg will be talking more about his house specifically. And I can include that link to the survey that the city's putting out for the strategic plan initiative.
Great.
Yeah. So if there aren't any last questions, just want to say thank you again to Greg for taking the time to talk to us tonight and for being a champion for reducing our emissions in the city and beyond. And I think a lot of good information and resources here.
So I'll just simply say, I'm glad to hear from anyone, but try to separate my city council role from my personal role. So I'll be glad to talk to anyone about anything about climate change as a person. I'm cautious to go too much as a city person because people tend to start to think we've committed to something. And as I said, I cannot make any commitments other than what I will do. But I cannot commit the city. That takes the city council. So.
And then just a quick note, Susan, if you could send me the information from that you shared, the Rewire America and wherever you got the energy audit, then I'll just send that out as kind of helpful resources for members of the group as well. Is there anything else that folks recall from this evening where they're like, oh, I want that information that I didn't say out loud? I can jot it down and share it out if there was something I missed. And always just send me an email if you find that there is something that was discussed that you would like a link to afterwards. All right, well, thank you guys so much for coming tonight. It was great to see all of you virtually and to learn together. I'm really looking forward to our January planning session now. I feel like we've got a little bit more information to kind of help us think about what might be some next steps for the group and to do some brainstorming.
And I'll just remind you that the post of the slides does have links for more research.
Yes.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everybody that's doing all this great stuff.
I thank you all for being
Here.
yes, taking your time. So
Thank
Nice.
you.
good night, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
It's